Please remember, this video contains graphic content which some viewers might find disturbing. Elizabeth Ann Bisceglia, better known as Betty, was born in the picturesque town of Eastchester, New York, on November 7, 1947. Picture white tree-lined streets, children playing in backyards, a quintessential post-war American town. As Betty grew, so did her dreams, hopes, and aspirations. She crossed paths with Daniel T. Broderick at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana in 1965. Their connection was palpable, a spark in the eyes of two young souls eager to conquer the world. The couple exchanged vows on April 12, 1969, sealing a promise to face the world together. 4 beautiful children followed, and with Dan's evident ambition, a bright future seemed inevitable. A doctor by training, he then pursued law at the prestigious Harvard. Betty was the main provider for the family, while Dan attended law school with the help of a student loan. As we transition into the 1980s, the Broderick household, on the surface, appeared to flourish. Dan's transition from medicine to law proved financially rewarding. The family moved into a 5-bedroom, ocean view home in the upscale Coral Reef neighborhood of La Jolla, San Diego. But beneath this facade of prosperity, internal tempests were brewing. While Dan was engrossed in his work at San Diego's leading law firm, Betty shouldered the primary responsibilities at home, raising their 4 children and managing the household. By 1983, the strains in their marriage became more apparent. Arguments intensified, often revolving around Dan's work hours and his increasing absence from home. The year 1985 marked a turning point in the Broderick saga. After years of Betty's suspicions, Dan admitted to having an affair with Linda Kokena, his 22-year-old legal assistant. The ramifications of this confession were immediate and profound. Betty, feeling a mix of betrayal and rage, drove her car into the front door of the family's Coral Reef home. She was subsequently detained at San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital for 3 days. By 1986, separation became inevitable. Dan moved out of their shared home, leaving Betty grappling with a sudden change in her life's trajectory. Divorce papers were soon served. The children, tragically caught in a crossfire, became unwitting pawns in a game of emotional tug-of-war. The late 1980s saw the Broderick divorce proceedings escalate into one of San Diego's most infamous legal battles. As Dan, equipped with his legal acumen and financial resources, navigated the system, Betty felt increasingly marginalized and outmaneuvered. With Dan's decisions to freeze joint assets and Betty's occasional withholding of visitation rights to their children, the courtroom became less a place of justice and more a battleground for their personal vendettas. In January 1989, the divorce was finalized, but not without leaving scars. Dan retained full custody of the children, and while Betty received a substantial settlement, $28,000 cash plus $16,000 monthly alimony, she viewed it as a pittance compared to the life and status she once enjoyed. Voice messages filled with anger and expletives became common, with Betty often venting her frustrations directly to Dan's answering machine. Despite all this, on April 22, 1989, Dan married Linda, who asked him to wear a bulletproof vest at the ceremony, fearing Betty might do something stupid. These fears materialized at 5:30 a.m. on November 5, 1989, as Betty entered the couple's home. Armed with a revolver, she made her way to the couple's bedroom. Moments later, 5 gunshots shattered the early morning silence. Linda died instantly, and then shortly after. Police arrived at the scene, and Betty, admitting to her actions, was taken into custody. The Betty Broderick case is a deeply intricate one that reveals the complexities of human emotions. It's important to understand that while the psychological triggers provide context to Betty Broderick's emotional state, they don't excuse or justify her actions. Several psychological triggers and elements can be discerned from available information. After supporting her husband through medical school and law school, raising their 4 children, and enduring what she perceived as numerous sacrifices for the sake of the marriage, Betty felt deeply betrayed when she believed Dan had an affair with a younger woman and subsequently left her for that woman. Over the years, Betty's identity became deeply entwined with her role as a supportive wife and mother. When the marriage dissolved, her core identity did as well, causing a profound sense of loss and aimlessness. Betty felt publicly humiliated by the separation, the perceived replacement by a younger woman, and the subsequent legal battles. Humiliation, especially when it is public and involves intimate aspects of one's life, can trigger intense emotional responses. As her feelings of betrayal and humiliation compounded, Betty became obsessed with what she perceived as injustices against her. This fixation magnified her emotions and likely impaired her judgment. Betty's behavior after the separation, such as leaving vulgar messages and driving her car into Dan's house, indicated that she lacked effective coping mechanisms to deal with her overwhelming emotions. These shocking events led to a legal battle that further thrust the Broderick case into the spotlight. Betty Broderick's trial would become one of San Diego's most highly publicized court cases. The first trial began in October 1990. Prosecutors painted a portrait of Betty as a woman driven by envy and rage, deliberately planning the murders of her ex-husband and his new wife. Betty's defense, on the other hand, argued that she was a victim too. They portray her as a woman pushed to the brink by years of psychological, emotional, and financial abuse. However, in November 1990, after days of deliberation, the jury remained deadlocked. Unable to reach an unanimous verdict, a mistrial was declared. The district attorney's office, undeterred, pursued a second trial. Commencing in February 1991, this trial followed a similar narrative but with a more defined strategy from both sides. This time, in December 1991, the jury reached a verdict. Betty was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder. By February 1992, she was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison, marking the conclusion of a trial saga that had captivated the nation. She is serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. In January 2010, her first request for parole was denied because she did not show remorse and did not acknowledge wrongdoing. In November 2011 and again in January 2017, her requests for parole were rejected. She'll have another opportunity for parole in January 2032 when she'll be 84 years old. In the wake of the Broderick trials, public discourse was divided. Some viewed Betty as a cold-blooded murderer, while others perceived her as a tragic figure pushed past her limits. The case became emblematic of the intense emotions and destructive potential characteristic of bitter divorces. In popular culture, the Broderick story found its way into books, documentaries, and dramatized series, ensuring that the events of those fateful years would remain etched in public memory. As we draw the curtain on the harrowing journey of Betty Broderick and the tragic events that unfolded over a span of years, it is crucial to step back and ponder. This isn't merely a tale of love, betrayal, and retribution. It is a stark reminder of the complexities of the human condition. Thank you for joining us today on Casual Evil. Until next time, stay safe and keep seeking the truth.